Welcome to Empowering Leadership, a podcast from Dorrier Underwood. Join us as we explore new perspectives on leadership and discover what it takes to be effective as a leader. Here's your host, Doug McVaden.
My guest today on the Empowering Leadership podcast is Giovanna Kanu. And Giovanna, our topic today is healing the divide. And people can already imagine what that might be. But I want to go back to when we first met, which was in a client-consultant relationship, right? So that was, 10 years ago or more?
Probably more than that. Maybe about 10 to 12 years ago is when.
So I just want to say it's great to see you again and to be with you and to talk with you after all this time.
Same here. Thank you.
Well, what would be maybe interesting is to trace our path since that time and tell us what you've been up to since that was in the pharmaceutical industry, right?
Yes, I was working for a venture capital-backed pharmaceutical company. And it was a small company that was based in Bridgewater, New Jersey. So that's North Jersey, but probably the most southern part of North Jersey. And so we had met there, and I was working as a director in clinical research. And from there, I had moved on to working with a larger pharmaceutical company and just growing and expanding. I wanted to be closer to the city. So I had an opportunity to go back into New York City, which is where I'm originally from. And I thought, well, let me just continue to grow and develop into this industry, but now being based back into a busy, buzzing kind of metropolitan city, which was important to me because otherwise I felt a bit removed from the hub of where I live. And then from there, I thought everything was pacing well. I was in a great company. I had a great team that I was working with, wonderful manager who I still today admire and keep in touch with. And so the growth path was there, it was all set. And then I just started to feel a little uncomfortable. And I thought, well, what is this? I made some adjustments. What I feel that I was lacking something. I was missing something. And I thought, well, I took care of some of the more immediate items, in terms of my location and in terms of being in a company where I could clearly see the growth path, and so that I can continue to grow and be promoted and further develop. But there was opportunity to move to the West Coast if I wanted, because that was something I was exploring. And then when I sat for a moment and I realized, oh, it's because my focus has changed now. So the work was the same. It was what I was interested in doing. And then I thought, well, let me see if I could create it here in this pharma company. Because it wasn't a dissatisfaction with pharmaceutical development. I still enjoyed and have a passion for that, but it was how we were going about it. So
you didn't become disgruntled with the field or anything like that. This was more something not expressed within you.
Correct. And exactly, because as I was growing and I had done a lot of growth from Dorrier Underwood experience and finding my voice and taking my leadership to a different level. And I just felt like, okay, well, now I felt a lot more in command of my work and how I could see and forecast what was going to happen on my clinical trials and how we could best move things forward. And then I found that I couldn't do it in my role that I'm in. So it was, I found that, okay, well, let me see, what do I need to do? And then I just got to a point where I said, well, I created. Let me create the opportunity. And I said, well, I can't create it here. So that led me to going off on my own. And I took one of the biggest leaps of my life. I left this wonderful position. If my grandmother was around, she would say, what are you doing? You never leave. Yeah, that's very risky. And in my situation, there's no one here to help me. So I don't have anyone to fall back on or have a financial support system to fall back into. It's me. And so I found, well, that was enough. And I left. And then I sat for 3 months. What do I want to do? And I just kept, and I had some wonderful colleagues that I least expected, that the conversation started to evolve. And I started to feel, okay, I think this is what I want to do. And then the opportunity came. And that was, I really wanted to start making a difference in patient recruitment for pharmaceutical companies. For these studies that we do, that's the number one hurdle for all clinical trials, are finding participants.
Let's go back to that. But first, let me step into what you opened up, that idea that when you become clear what you want to do, that something really happens. Then we experience it as magic. I'm not sure that's the best explanation, but something happens that didn't happen before that moment. I just don't want to pass that by in your story and start talking about the other yet.
Yeah. And that's something that through Center for Spiritual Living of North Jersey is what I came to learn a lot about. And so that was another thing that was happening. Doria Underwood opens up my mind a bit, self-exploration, because the better you understand yourself, the better leader you are.
And so that was the work that we first did together, was the work of self-awareness as a leader.
Right. Absolutely.
And tell me what the key shift was for you in that time. You hadn't worked on yourself in that way. You had always been working on the work, the project, the drug development. What about that changed how you saw yourself?
I found, you know what, Doug, there was a exercise that we did. We had to do a 360, an evaluation where I went to interview someone and I told them how I described my interaction with them and how that made me feel. And then they told me the same. At that moment, I was able to see myself in a room through the eyes of others who I'm working with. That opened my eyes, because then I believe in that moment, I learned the better I am, the more comfortable I am, the more comfortable I set the tone, especially in the role that I play. And I think really anyone in a team, everyone brings their energy, but being the leader, people saw things that I thought that I was doing very well in covering up, and, discomforts that I had in myself. And they came off very awkward. And so they respected me because they saw that, I can do a good job and I was reliable and dependable. But what about the ease in which we were working together? And then I said, oh, that's where I have to start. And then I thought and I just became so aware I can change that. I don't have to go and read a book and get a whole degree in project management or get a certification in that. It wasn't required, because that skill set wasn't what I was missing. It was going within and kind of tweaking, addressing some things that others were seeing and experiencing and may have been taking personally if they're not self-aware. And then I was like, okay, wait, let me make these adjustments. And when I made those adjustments, I saw the change around me.
Isn't that something? So you saw how others see you is not how you saw yourself. And once you saw yourself the way others see you, you made what you called adjustments. And then things really changed. All of a sudden you discovered that the way people are acting has a lot to do with you. Because look at that, all you did was change your own perspective, and they, quote unquote, changed.
Right.
Right. And you didn't say anything to them about changing.
Right. And now, not to say that people aren't going to behave in the way in which they're modeled to be.
Yeah.
Because they will. Everyone. Sure. But what was happening is we were having an interaction, and I could see my part in the interaction and what was being reflected back.
Yeah.
And then with that, then I was able to open up and be able to see that, oh, wait, I think what I'm seeing before me is not someone who's resisting or who, let's just go with that because it's so easy to talk about when there's a conflict.
Yeah.
And I said, well, that conflict, I could tell, is it the work? Is it this interaction? Is it something within them? Because I went through the process. I understood. And so that's why I think even as I sit now, I can really listen. That's another thing. That was a hidden skill that I wasn't expecting to learn, how to listen better and get myself out of it. And this is all going to wrap up quite nicely, Doug, to what we came here today to talk about.
Yeah.
Because Doria Underwood, which I credit so much of my personal development and professional to, because all I thought was I was just, I had to deliver a task. I had to get a study up and going. I had to work very hard every day. I had to make sure that I was following regulations and making sure I was communicating timelines and solving problems. And then I thought, no, this is much bigger. And
so you said that your access point was patient recruitment. You want to get involved in the patient recruitment, but then you mentioned working with the Center for Spiritual Living in North Jersey, and then 2020 happened with George Floyd and all the others. And so how did that all come together? Because now you're on the forefront of a different endeavor than patient recruitment.
Yeah. So let me thread the needle through all those pieces.
Okay, great.
Which was the self-development. So as I'm going through Doria Underwood, then I'm also finding a home, a spiritual home, as we call it, or I found a place where I could explore now this spiritual side of me, which once was religious. And then I thought that doesn't quite fit. I think it's more spiritual. And I started hanging out with this wonderful group of people that's led by Dr. Michelle Wadley. She's the spiritual director of the Center for Spiritual Living of North Jersey. And so I became a member. And again, it's a lot of looking into yourself and understanding you and the God within us, universe, God, whatever you want to call it. It's within us, and in how that empowers us to be the best and fulfill our purpose. And then through that, I became an independent consultant because I felt, well, I could do all these things because of what I am. Okay, so then we get to now I'm deciding to make shifts in my professional career, professional development. And I said, I'm going to go out on my own. And opportunities presented itself for me to now address the big problem, one of the biggest problems of clinical trials, which is patient recruitment. I started assisting a company in training up physicians who would have greater access to the potential patients, because sometimes I don't want to get into a lot of the detail of that, but I had an opportunity to train physicians who have never done clinical research before, and that they would allow access now to potential patients who may be interested. And they didn't know that they would be interested because they just never had an opportunity. And that there'd be now a greater and wider spread of knowledge about clinical trials. And now as this is going on, and then, I did that for a while, and then it started to evolve into other things. And then, I'm still working as a consultant. And then what happens with George Floyd and then the pandemic, as with the rest of the world, I was crushed. I felt pain that and anger, but I knew how to address this anger. It wasn't, I knew not to get uncontrolled and just lash out, because I said, wait, this is hitting me differently. Because again, we've experienced, I identify as Black. I am a biracial woman, but I identify as Black. I was raised in the Black culture. And so my life has always been attuned to racism. And if it had not happened to me directly, it has happened to boyfriends and people in my family. So it was different. And I don't believe it's because I was a captive audience watching this on television. That's not what happened for me. For me personally, it was where I was in my own self-development. And I was so open and raw, and I felt it.
I'm interested, Giovanna, you said, I knew how to deal with this anger, or I knew how to, like, what did you mean there? Like you said, I knew not to lash out, but you also said you knew how. That's interesting that you say that.
And I say that because I believe as I became more self-aware, I'm able to listen. It's more of, I can take the ego out. I can identify ego within me rather quickly. And I place that aside because I want to actually get what's really going on inside of me. What's the response? What am I truly feeling? And the ego is the one that sometimes goes along with the rest of the world. And they're like, well, I'm going to be angry about this because it's something to be angry about. And then I'm going to choose sides, and I'm going to feel this way about white people and white supremacy, and not taking anything away from those events or ways of being. But it's not what I was feeling. And that's what I had to get in tune with. And that's where I say everything is very individualized. And I believe that everything is to help further develop us. And so I thought, well, then it became, as we were talking about, a call of action. I think everyone was sitting and wanting to know, well, do I go out and march? Do I create a sign and go and march in the streets of New York? And I felt I strongly considered that. And I said, that's not going to do it for me, what I'm feeling. And then I just stayed quiet for a while and listened. And then I had a wonderful opportunity with this Center for Spiritual Living of North Jersey, because our spiritual director said, hey, let's just get on the phone call and check in. Let's just see how people are doing. Because again, it was a pandemic and no one could come together in person. So we had a phone call. From the phone call led to, hey, there's this book. Maybe we all should just read this book together. And I became a part of that. And I actually begged if I could be a part of it, because the book was called White Fragility, or is called White Fragility.
Yes, I'm familiar with it, yes.
Yeah, and it was thought that maybe it should be a book that should be read by only white people. And I said, I didn't want that. I wanted everyone to participate. I wanted it to be open to everyone. And to be a little funny, I thought, well, you know what? I'm half white, so I think I'll just go ahead and express the half white in me. There you go. To allow myself to meet the criteria, because I sit on both sides if I want. Yeah. But anyway, we talked a lot about it, and she said, yes, she changed her mind about it, and anyone who wanted to participate could. And that was my first introduction. And that was I gotta figure out what's going on. And the telling of who I am, I always have to understand why. Why? What is the reason? And I guess that's why I'm a researcher. I do really go and I must understand, but why? Don't tell me that there's white supremacy. I didn't grow up understanding that idea, but yet I still experience. And I'm sure there's many people which I learned, many people didn't understand what that was, but yet there was still something that was always brewing under these undertones of racism, indifference, and fear, and not understanding. So we separate. And that I credit to, again, Dr. Michelle Wadley came up with the title, Healing the Divide.
Okay.
For me, I think with anyone has a different understanding of what that meant. Because I didn't want there to be a divide. I understood that there was one. I just wanted to blur the borders of the divide. So we read the book together, and then there became another opportunity of, well, what's next? And as I was reading the book, and I was assisting as part of the leadership team that was overseeing the book review. And so with that, I was asked, what would I like to do next? Is there anything else I had in mind? And then that's when I had realized that I'm gonna step out with an idea that I had as I was part of the book review. And I said, you know what? That was one person's viewpoint. There's many viewpoints.
Yes.
And I said, well, what I think I would like to do in a group setting, let's all just sit back, push back from the table of this one book in one perspective, and let's get a multimedia, multi-person approach to racism. I wanted to know, what were the poets saying about racism? What are musicians? Of course, authors of books, activists, children, regular people. And I said, let's do that. Let's listen to how this has impressed many people. Because what I was looking for in all of that, on all the different perspectives, there's going to be this nice overlap.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be what we're all saying and what we're all feeling and what we all see.
Wait, that's your theory? There would be this nice overlap? You're thinking, or you're saying that's what you found? No,
I thought that was my theory.
That was your theory, yes.
That somewhere in all of this overlap, and where the overlap lies is the answer.
Okay.
And what I was trying to find was, what is racism? What is it?
Yeah.
Where did it come from? And because once you understand that, then you understand what to do about it. Because I really don't believe that it's white people's fault. It's Black people's fault. It's the Pilgrims' fault.
So like, what is it? Is it a set of practices? Is it something inherited? Is it something that's taught? Is it something that is just habits, or is it something that's a philosophy? Right. All those. Okay.
All those things. Yes.
And then how do we orient ourselves toward it? Because what we're basically experiencing are the symptoms or the results of racism.
Yes.
Right. Not like necessarily racism itself. What is that? Because we're experiencing things that are the result of being taught that there's even such a thing as Black and white. I mean, which isn't even like, you just look at the two of us. I mean, I know this is on audio, but our neither one of our skin tones matches the color white, and neither one of our skin tones comes close to matching the color Black. So those are just representations even. They aren't even, those are terms, right? So, but that's a part of what in our company, when we've been learning how many words were taught to us that had a certain meaning, that's not the meaning. That's not the meaning of that word. That's a slant on the meaning.
Yes.
Right. That we're taught even the word Black. You've seen the famous clip where Muhammad Ali was saying all the things he was taught that are white. Like, how come the white cake is angel's food cake and the Black cake is devil's food cake? Okay, you're taught that as a little kid, and nobody teaches you that there's a deeper meaning. But then you notice the trend. So
in understanding, in my quest to understand what racism is and where do we start, I wanted to get a perspective of what everyone is feeling about it. What's everyone's perspective? Because somewhere in all of that, because guess what? We all are made, I believe, we're all from the same creator. We're all the same. We look differently, but I've had so many experiences where I got to know someone who I never grew up with. And I was just actually thinking of a colleague that I had met early on in my career. He lived in Spokane, Washington, and I'm in Brooklyn, New York. And he was training me. He was one of my first trainers in something that we call clinical research associates. I would go out and be a monitor. And so we had to meet. And after he was training me, we were talking, and we talked about how different it was of how we grew up. But yet we got along so well, and we could sit and laugh and have perspectives of things that were very, what's the word? They were very complimentary. They weren't opposing. They were complimentary. I'm a city girl. He's growing up in the mountains and he's driving a pickup truck. I didn't even have a car until I was an adult. And, he had been driving a pickup truck since a child, and just different, just very different, but then yet the same. So then with that, and that's what I believe, that all of us are from the same. And I said, well, let's just, I want to get out of the heads of just one particular mindset. Because I read and we had the book review. Okay, that's one perspective. But let's see what everyone else is saying. And I really wanted to see and allow a platform for artists, because there's a way in which artists see the world. Because they spend a lot, I believe, and actually I have seen, because I've watched a lot of documentaries in the past year and a half.
Yeah.
And the creators, be it music producers or artists, singers, performers, they get to this place where they there's a lot of introspection, and then something's created. And so I said, well, that's what I want to see. What did they create from that as it related to racism? And then that's what we did. And then the program was born. And Maureen DeBrito became my partner. We had in the very beginning, few of us came together to try to work together to bring the program to a head. And then, along the way, Mo DeBrito and myself were the main leaders in taking on building the program.
And so the program is Healing the Divide. When you're saying the program, you're saying Healing the Divide. So just tell us a little bit about the rollout, what was accomplished in the first one. I think the people from Dorier Underwood were in that program. Was that the first one?
That was the second one.
That was the second one. Okay.
The first one was the book review. And the second one was what Dorier Underwood participated in. And that was also, we stayed with the same title, Healing the Divide.
Yes.
And then how we rolled this out, we spent probably 3 months researching, and we just went into the World Wide Web and we just started typing simple search terms, and we found poets, we found TED Talks, because that's how we were able to learn of children. Through discussions with other friends and colleagues, we were introduced to schools that had efforts, universities that were putting forth efforts into righting what they thought was wrong, that was symptomatic of racism.
Yes.
And then we thought, well, we brought it all together, we organized it, and we rolled it out. And we had a way of rolling this out that many people were against it first, but I think I didn't hear much of a complaint at the end, but we wanted to take everyone. It was a 6-week course. We wanted to take them week by week, and we would only release 1 week at a time. We didn't want to overwhelm anyone. We also wanted to see, and we wanted to experience for ourselves their transformation. Because once we pulled the program together, so this is what was going on for those 3-4 months that we were creating the program. We had run through the program ourselves. So we found all the material, we put it together, we organized it, and then we sat and we ran through the program. And Maureen and I sat every week, multiple times, sometimes during the week, and we would sit and talk about what we read, what we listened to, whatever it was that was part of the program. And we would talk for hours, and we would make tweaks. Some things didn't make the cut because it was too tough.
Well, so there wasn't a point. There wasn't a teaching. There wasn't like, here's the lesson that we want you to learn from this time. It was more organic, based in people's sharing, sounds like. Yes.
Yes. As Mo would say, we wanted to, everyone has their own gift in this program.
Yeah.
So we were very hands off. We did not want to guide and say, well, this is the expected outcome, or here's the goal for this particular week. Just take your hands off the steering wheel We gave the material. Everyone has their own gift. And that gift is, what do they learn about themselves during this program? Or what did they discover? And for some, and we thought we would take, even if they learned a new artist that they'd never been exposed to before, or if they became so interested in one book that we just highlighted briefly, and then they wanted to deep dive on that later with another group, which actually is an example of what happened. There was one group was impressed by one of the books that we had referenced. And after the program, they created their own small group and did an independent group study of that book. So, and that's what we said, because we wanted to see what was going to happen and allow everyone to be their own individual and allow the impact and the evolution to occur. So we give you all perspectives, and then you decide.
And yet there was a structure, meaning there were times to meet, there were assigned readings, and then you were discussing the same thing that everybody had read. So it wasn't exactly free form either.
No. So what we did was we put together week by week what we wanted anyone to listen, what was the lesson for the week.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And we broke out into smaller groups. So we had about 50 participants. And then we broke out into smaller groups so that when we would come together to discuss, we would have manageable groups. And then we also had the help of what we call, team leaders, we'll call them for now. I can't recall what the term was, but it doesn't matter. But we had someone it was a smaller group that would lead those discussions and lead them in the way of just making sure that they stayed on topic.
So what did you learn? What was accomplished in that? Talk to me about some of the things that emerged from that you observed or that you could now see as possible as a result of that process.
The self-development. I went into this with the question of why and what? What is this and why? And then I found along the way my own prejudices. I thought, wow, how am I going to go outside of me and ask for others to behave lovingly, compassionately, and be fearless when I had my own to deal with that I wasn't aware of? And at times I thought it was maybe just, feeling victimized. And then working with Maureen, I realized too, from her own perspectives, as we were sharing very honestly, that she had her own as well. It was difficult for us to hear that. I'm going to say for myself, it was difficult because I did run a group. I didn't hear that. I think a lot of times people were coming to just talk about what they felt and what their impressions were. Some people were a bit more sharing and open with themselves. But I heard that happen in other groups. In my group, it was still a very good, every time we met, it was a good discussion. It was peeling back layers in themselves. And then that's where I just wanted to keep it. It's like, keep it personal, keep it to yourself. Yeah. You don't have to worry about how does I feel as a Black person about the material, because you wanted to understand that as a white person. It's like, it doesn't matter. It's what do you feel? Let's stay there.
Well, so let me ask about that. So it's like, if you're sharing what it's like to be Black in America and to be raised in that environment, then when it comes to me, it's not for me to comment on what I think about your experience. It's for me to say what it's like being one of the ruling class, being a white man, what it's like growing up in that environment and or something like that. Like, what am I seeing about being part of the system, not my comment on your experience.
Correct. And well, right? let me adjust that a little.
Yeah, please.
It was more, so we had some basic rules when we went into each of the discussion groups, and everyone had to be in agreement with them. And one was that we would not expect that people would explain themselves to my understanding. And there's a different way that we put that, but it was basically allow people to speak and share as much as they want. You can ask questions, but again, you're not to try to get
you're
more.
You're not interrogating the
interrogating
person.
anyone.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So with that,
like I might ask you why you feel that way, or what's the experience that makes you say that. I could ask you that. Like, well, what are you talking about? How come you feel that way, Giovanna, about voting? Okay. How come you feel despondent about voting if that's something you said? Why don't you just, like, from a white perspective, you just go and vote? What's the big deal? Right.
Right. And and we did not. We had very limited, we didn't want to make it about black and white. Like we weren't trying to, I want to hear what all the white people say and what all the black people are saying and the ones that are in between. No, it wasn't that. It was, we're all impacted by racism.
Yeah.
Even if you're non-black and white and you're on the sideline, what would appear to be the sidelines, you're still having an impact. You're feeling something, and also you're participating in something. So the perspectives that were shared we were trying to get to what is Doug's perspective? What is Giovanna's perspective? I don't really care to know the white male perspective and the black female perspective. It was because, again,
so that's what you're correcting. And it's like, I'm not representing any perspective just because of my ethnic characteristics, because I can't speak to that, because other people, just because they have my ethnic characteristics, don't necessarily share my experience or my emotions or my views. In fact, that's part of the issue, is thinking that just because we have the same ethnic characteristics, that then we know something about the person or what they think. Right. It's like, you don't have, just because I happen to be white and male, that doesn't mean you know my heart now. Right. Oh. And so it's okay. Great. I got that.
Your background and experiences in life could have brought you to a different understanding of life. And then also we had people that were from different countries that were participating. Yes. So again, that's a different perspective. You come from a country that's predominantly black, your perspective is different about racism, or you come from an Asian country, different perspective. So that's really what we wanted to do, be very hands-off and allow the self-development to happen. And that's why we really wanted them to depend less on the team leaders. Tell me, what were we supposed to gain from that? What's the right answer? Because we did have questions that would help in discussions, and starting up a discussion if needed. But we didn't want to come in and say, well, this is what we're saying is right or wrong from this Center for Spiritual Living. We made no declaration about what's right or wrong. There is no right or wrong. It's come from a place of love and understanding of yourself. And that's what we try to every week to get to. What was the impact on you? How did that impact? What are your thoughts on this? And so many of the discussions were just very personal.
Well, that sounds like it actually accomplishes what the title says, which is healing the divide, because there's a divide that's always experienced personally, right? Even calling it that divide, it's not between groups, it's between the person and the world. Like, we feel divided from what's going on in the world. We feel separate from it. We've been doing our own version of healing the divide at Dorrier Underwood. Giovanna, I know you know a little bit about that, where we've assigned readings and then come together and done calls following that format of people express themselves and say what they learned or noticed or observed about themselves or from their perspective. And then we just go to the next person. Like, people don't then turn and comment on, well, that's a good insight for you, or what about that? Or do you really think that? Nobody challenges your insight or your belief. We just go to the next person and let that person. And it's actually been remarkable. Okay. The kind of stuff that we've gotten into, because people know there's not going to be a response. They're not going to be called upon to prove their point. And so if you know you don't have to prove something, you can say what's really opening up in your mind and how the things that you're surprised by, because all of us have been surprised. The white men in our company have suddenly experienced not being welcome. No one wants to hear what we have to say just because of our ethnicity. Like, we don't need another viewpoint from a white man. And that's been very interesting to have that, people share that experience, because even if we've had that experience, we've never shared about it in a group that's not all men or not all white men, not all white. That's kind of a private conversation that we would have had. And to put that on loudspeaker, it's so interesting. Just saying it actually seems to move something. People say where they are, and it even sounds sometimes stuck. Like, I'm telling you, this whole thing is confusing to me, and I don't feel like I did anything wrong. So how come I'm the enemy now? Okay. Something like that, right? Every conversation I walk into the room, I'm thinking I'm just Doug, but now I'm the enemy walking in the room. How did that happen? And so, right. Being able to say that, I'm telling you, shifted it. Okay. So once I said that, then I saw, oh, well, that's a story I could have. That's not actually what's happening. Okay. But it was my experience. And when I said it, a lot of other guys said, yeah, me too. Okay. And then it was like, oh, okay. So this is like a transpersonal experience. This is not something happening. And I think you've had that realization. I've heard you say some things, where it's not just you, like you're not alone having that thought. We're not all that special. We're much more like each other than we're different.
Yes,
because there I said that thing I just said about feeling alienated or like the enemy. Immediately, dozens of people say they know exactly how I feel. Well, how do they know how I feel? I'm by myself when I'm feeling that. I didn't share them before. What are they doing having my experience? I was sharing my personal experience that was just me, that I hadn't told anybody about. How come they know exactly what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think part of the divide gets healed just when we realize there's not that much of a divide. Because how come they know exactly what I'm talking about? And this is the first time I've ever told them, and they can elaborate, and they give me an example from their life, and I go, yeah, exactly. So that's part of where I really think that in those moments, I feel like there's a divide that can be healed.
Right. Yes. And let's heal the divide without there being any feeling of guilt. Because there were, and we wanted to make sure that we expressed or shared some stronger views that we had come across that were pointing fingers or accusing. At the end of it, I think what we all found is there's not just one group, one person, one action that started all of this. No, we all have a hand in it. Even the Black person has a hand in it. It's all for us to participate in the healing, because the healing is very personal. So then and that's really what the take home was that the work starts with you. Just look at yourself, understand how you feel about it. What comes up for you? And again, put the ego aside, put aside what the mainstream media is saying and what they're pointing to. Just sit with yourself for a minute, and you'll find what that is. And then I saw that with some of the stories that my partner shared with me, my partner being Maureen DeBrito, and what she would share. I'm like, wow. And we both sat there and said, well, look at how we were able to look within ourselves and find a place that we needed to heal. And then that made me better prepared to come and have more meaningful relationships about healing and seeing differently. And that was it. So it's first understand where it sits with you. And then we just tried different media, different perspectives, because everyone picks up something different. I know that there were many people that didn't like the first book that we did at the book review. And I could understand why. So I wanted to take a softer approach. It's like, I don't want to just say it's all your fault, one group. Let's just see how do I play into this? And then, as we've always said, hurt people, And guess what? Healed people will heal people. They could be part of the healing. It's very true. I see it every day. I practice this many times where if there's an assault on me, I feel assaulted, first of all. That's my experience. Then I usually find the ego. I'm like, oh, there it is. There's the ego words around that. And I sit it aside. And I was like, okay, but what else was going on? Because then that's where the truth is. That's really what happened. And then I can manage it. I can address it then. And I think that a lot of in work culture, I think a lot of us are exposed to that way of thinking where many people say, take 24 hours before you answer an email. Take a moment to think before you respond.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, so looking back now, we're going into 2022. It's coming up on 2 years since George Floyd and the impact of that and sort of the collective wake-up call, that we all received. What do you think we've, where are we on the journey, do you think? Can you get any perspective on that? It's hard to see your own path when you're on the path, but I wonder if you have an assessment of where we are and what's next. Maybe not worry about so much what's next, but where have we come, coming up on 2 years from that.
So where are we now? I think we are, and what I personally have experienced when trying to make a change, I go to the extreme other side of the risk of how I think and express myself in it. And I get very clumsy with it. It's almost like a deer a doe learning to walk. It's very clumsy and you fall down a lot and you make a lot of mistakes. You say crap that's wrong. You've gone too far over to compensate from the change that the place where you were once before you decided to make the change. And then at some point you get a little more stable and comfortable and you can find your way better. You feel, because what you've learned from those mistakes, you've gotten responses back. So you've either gotten a slap on the wrist or you've gotten, okay, yeah, no, I could support that, or I understand. And so I think what has happened for me, and this is my theory, is that I then kind of along the way from that point, I kind of come back to the middle. And in that middle is where my strength is in terms of where I stand. And I feel very comfortable in it. And so that's where I think the world is. With the verdicts and everything, we see that there's a lot of people that are, we're in the midst of change and we're going to the far left where we're being very severe, I would say, on some of the responses that we've had. And then there's been responses to that severity. And the responses have also been, well, the next time we have an opportunity to respond, we're not going to respond like that at all. And I don't want to go into the political of it, but that's where we are. And I think what's going to happen, because it's my theory, in the next couple of years, we're going to settle into the middle again. Where I hope, though, is in that many of us will come out of that changed. And then there'll be many that are not, because they've fallen back into what was comfortable, because some people cannot bear to be uncomfortable. And so they're not ready yet. And so some people will progress along, and then some will have to do this all over again. And they'll be a part of that cycle of change again. But it'll be so beautiful for those that were able to do the work, look within themselves, and then they see the evolution of themselves and then see how they are within a system and how they change, the system changes around them. And so that's what I wanted to also accomplish, was that I can make the change within my system. For anyone who I have the opportunity to interact with, I'm going to bring forth that, my evolved self. And then they will experience that, and then we'll see. Well, we would have had a moment, and I'll experience their evolved self, for good, for bad. It's an evolution.
I love that, and it's like that's how history moves forward. That's how we have. It's not everybody all at once.
Yeah.
It's not everybody all at once, but there's a group that starts to see the system you're in while you're in it. And that's when you have a chance to go to the next level, to transcend that system and go for something higher as a group. I mean, we've seen it throughout history when we learned how to build civilization and, learned how to interact as a globe when it used to just be a village. Was as big as we could see. So that's great.
And it allows us to evolve into our personal being and what's our ultimate purpose, each individual's ultimate purpose. And that's really what we're here. And so, you know what, as we evolve and change, some will have met their purpose and die.
Yeah.
Some have to do it again, or some have to now do more work in that space of their evolution and make more impact because their purpose is now still being lived out. That's my personal belief.
That's a great philosophy. I appreciate your sharing that cyclical vision of the future. And we're coming back around is what I hear, coming back around to a stable place after being in an extreme place. And I like that it's optimistic, but it's not based on optimism or just being positive. It's based on an analysis of how things go and how things work out. And so I just really appreciate that. And I appreciate you. I appreciate everything you're doing and the effort that you've sparked in my company. And, hopefully as a result of this podcast, other companies and other places in the world to make an effort to heal the divide that we've all noticed that we're, experiencing.
Right.
So, well, thank you so much for being on the Empowering Leadership podcast with me today.
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate it. And I also appreciated an opportunity to share my experience with that. And I think many people wanted to know, as one of the co-creators of the program, how did it impact me and what did I really want? Because we kept that quiet because it wasn't about Maureen or Giovanna. It was more about your own self. So it's nice to be able to share that. And I think by having shared it, maybe I've sparked it to be really what will happen. Because now I'm going to reveal what we wanted, what I wanted, which was to have everyone to just self-evolve. And when you self-evolve into love, then we can handle all of what's going on in the world. We can do it together.
Thank you for listening to Empowering Leadership. If you enjoyed this episode, take a moment to subscribe for free on your favorite podcast platform. Give us a rating and a review so that other leaders like yourself can find us. Sign up for Dorrier Underwood's email newsletter by visiting us at dorrierunderwood.com. Dorrier Underwood serves visionary companies who are serious about realizing their dreams and who are unwilling to settle for incremental results. Our clients are looking for breakthrough results and a deeper sense of satisfaction and fulfillment. To learn more, visit us at dorrierunderwood.com. That's it for now. Go forth and be amazing and take good care of your people. Empowering Leadership is produced by Dorrier Underwood and Andy Go of Gojo Studios.